Welcome, and thank you all for joining us today for the Big Sky Mental Health Virtual Panel Series, starting with Coping with Quarantine, Social Distancing, Uncertainty, and Anxiety in a Time of COVID. My name is Dr. Gloria Petrozelli with Sacramento State Athletics. I am the chair of the Big Sky Mental Health Subcommittee and today's moderator. I would like to start today by acknowledging all the members of the Big Sky Mental Health Subcommittee for their time, dedication, and commitment. Today's event is a result of our collective efforts. As a friendly reminder, today's panel discussion will be recorded and available to view on the Big Sky Conference YouTube page, as well as the mental health resource page. I'm going to start today by allowing our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves and share why they wanted to participate in today's panel discussion. We'll start with Nate. Nate, could you please introduce yourself and share why it is important for you to participate in today's panel?
Sorry, was that me? My Wi-Fi just disconnected. I'm Nate DeGraw. I play defensive line for University of Idaho football team. I'm a redshirt junior, majoring in secondary education.
Thank you. We'll go to Coach Zach.
Hi, everybody. My name is Zach Claus. I'm with the Idaho men's basketball program, and I've been very lucky to be a part of this committee and looking forward to having a great discussion and hopes that we can help multiple people out there that get a chance to watch.
Thank you. We'll have Shay next.
Hi, my name is Shyla Murakami, and I'm a junior on the gymnastics team at Southern Utah University. I'm an exercise science major, and I wanted to be a part of this panel today so I could share with you guys how COVID has affected us as student athletes.
Thank you. Next, Dr. Adams, and then we'll have Coach Jen.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tegan Adams, a sport and clinical psychologist at UC Davis, and really excited to be here today.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Coach Jenny Huth, and I'm in my third year here at UNC, former player at the University of Colorado. So know what it's like to be an athlete too. And I am a part of this committee and I'm excited about it because I think mental health and mental wellness is important. I want to help remove the stigma around it, and I want to be here to help in any way that I can.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Your participation is truly valuable. Let's start with the student athletes. If you can share what your experiences have been since the start of quarantine, and maybe elaborate on how it's also been impacted by the fires and the social unrest during this time.
Okay, I'll go first. So I actually ended up having to quarantine for a little over a month. I got exposed the first time by my roommates because they tested positive for COVID. So I had to quarantine for a week before getting tested. And those test results came back negative, and I was super pumped about that. And then the day before I was supposed to go back to practice, I got re-exposed. So I had to get re-quarantined, re-tested. And that time, my results came back positive. So I had to quarantine for 2 more weeks after that. So I was in quarantine for quite a while, but yeah.
What sorts of things, or what did you feel was helpful in getting through that time?
Definitely lots of FaceTime calls for me is what got me through that. Like still being able to talk to all my friends and stuff like that.
Great. Nate, would you like to share your experience?
Yeah, so I was quarantined for about 27 days because I had been exposed to it 3 times. Luckily, all my results came back negative, so I didn't have to do the 2-week protocol for that. It was just kind of until then. one of the things that helped me get through it was my roommates were exposed to it at the same time. So it was nice knowing like I wasn't the only one going through that, and they were home too. So being able to see like it wasn't just me, and that this is just the protocol we need to follow to make sure we can play.
For the student athletes, do you feel that you got enough support from the team or the athletics community where you're at? Or do you feel like there was something more you needed during that time to cope?
I feel like I definitely got enough support. I talked to our athletic trainers at least once a day throughout almost every single day that I was in quarantine. So just knowing that they were there and like making sure everything was good with me, I felt like I had everything I needed.
Same for me. I talked to my coaches and my athletic trainers every day, and they would ask me how I was doing and if I needed anything. So that was super nice.
And Dr. Adams, I was wondering if you could chime in and share the range of experiences that you're hearing from student athletes that you work with.
Sure. I think this has been a really hard time for so many people and so many reasons. And also I've heard from a lot of athletes that it's been a relief in some way to slow down and let your body rest and recoup in a way that you don't typically get to when you're managing athletics and the season and academics and such a busy day. And so that has been, I think, an interesting piece of this that a lot of people have benefited from. And then sometimes there's also an increase in return to play as a result of that. And so some anticipation and in that way as well can be challenging.
Yeah, I'm wondering for the student athletes also having all that time, did you feel, yeah, the relief, but also like, what do I do with my time now? And were there any activities that you would recommend or things that you got into that could be helpful for any student athletes watching today?
It was super nice for me because I got to spend lots of time with my family, so that was nice. And also give my body a break because I was dealing with some back problems this year. So that little 4-month break was probably good for it, but we were definitely itching to get back in the gym and start training again because we've never had breaks like that before.
I felt like the break was really nice for just like a mental aspect. It let me learn my playbook even more and study film, so it wasn't just so much working out and everything like that. It really let me focus on the mental side of the sport.
Anything that you would recommend to student athletes that are maybe currently going through quarantine? Any advice?
I would just say be open about how you're feeling. Like when I would get pretty bored, I'd be kind of upset. And so then I would just talk to my friends and like stay in contact with them. I played a lot of video games. And so there's a couple of us in quarantine and we'd always play together. So just stuff like that.
And especially now with school, I feel like it's easier to keep busy than during the summer when we weren't doing anything. So that's probably nice too.
So what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's a range of experiences and there's like no right or wrong way to feel about going through quarantine. And it sounds like for you student athletes, having that support, letting yourself play video games, making sure you connect with people are really important, but also just itching, like you said, itching to get back into the gym, even though the rest was good. So it's kind of like both an and. Yeah. So coaches, and then if student athletes want to chime in on this next question, how have you tried to stay connected and engaged with your team throughout this time? You know, if you have a larger team, I can see that there's only one of you and so many athletes and staff and team. But also, what challenges have you encountered?
I will jump in there in terms of, the daily interaction that we're also used to having, even during the summer when you're used to having your team around you and having that ability to just have the guys come by the office and spend time talking to them. That was out the window. And it was added to that was recruiting guys via Zoom that you really didn't get a chance to meet in person. I know for us, we had 3 young men that came to campus in August that their first time to Moscow was when they showed up to start school. And that was the first time we had the chance to be with them in person. Over the course of the summer, it posed, a daily thought process as to you want to reach out to them, but you also want to give some, the guys their space, and you want to give them updates as far as making sure that they feel like they're up to speed in terms of what was going on, what was going to happen, when it was going to happen. And so you played with that. I know at our staff, as far as how much interaction did we have, how many Zoom meetings did we have? And then, if there wasn't really anything new, it was, okay, well, let's just, we'd spread out the team and reach out to them via text or give them a call, or, just an individual FaceTime to just continue to have that interaction. So it was definitely an adjustment over the summer for sure. And for us, I mean, now that we're on campus, it's really nice to be able to have some interaction and get to see everybody in person again. Has been wonderful.
Thanks, Zach. Yeah, I echo his sentiments. It's a lot more fun in person, but for us, we tried to have a weekly Zoom call, and those ranged a bunch. Sometimes it was just an update about what's going on with COVID. As a leader, it's really hard to not have answers. And through COVID, we don't have answers all the time. And so our players could sometimes feel like we were hiding something, or any of those sort of ambiguous topics, we might not have answers for. And so as a head coach, that was really hard to not always have the answers, but we tried to be as transparent as we could as information would come. And then we did a sisterhood series where we brought in speakers to talk to our players about championship level culture. So we did a whole series on that via Zoom. We read a book together and dissected ways to be a great teammate from John Gordon's Hard Hat book. So that way there was some interaction, and then we did some breakout groups through those interactions. And this was all on Tuesdays. The sisterhood series was on Thursdays. And then checking in, just, in the in-between time. How you doing? Is there anything you need? That kind of dialogue. Now, it's hard to be honest sometimes, like, I'm not doing well, like, how do I go about this? But I did get some pretty good feedback in terms of, hey, things aren't going so well. And then we'd maybe brainstorm about ideas of what they could be doing during the quarantine. And then eventually we came to a brainstorming session and said, what happens when we get back to school? How can we still have fun? And our whole team brainstormed ideas of ways to have fun, even in the dorm rooms, in COVID, in quarantine, all different avenues, so that we could be safe, but still have some strategy behind it.
Yeah, those are some really great points to make. It sounds like for both coaches, maintaining that constant communication and just letting your team know that you're there and you're thinking of them. But it also sounds like for like some of the first years, it's still kind of like a struggle because you have yet to develop that relationship with them. So one challenge is for the younger or the first year folks or the transfers, how do you continue to establish that relationship of trust? Which Coach Huth, you mentioned just that it may seem like there is erosion of trust because you don't always have the information that they want, and you keep telling them, I don't know yet, and that it's hard to continue and have hope or even trust when you keep getting the same answer. Would that make sense? With that connecting? For the student athletes, do you feel that, when you were in quarantine, that hearing from your coach kind of sent a different kind of message? Nate or Shylin, do you want to chime in on that?
I felt like it was like the same message. Like, it's just, you guys are everyone's being as open as possible, but the fact is, like, we just don't know what is happening. So it is kind of frustrating to not know what's next, but like nobody knows what's next. And I feel like not knowing is better than giving false advice or like false information and expecting that to go out.
I think the hard thing with COVID is like changes day to day. So one day we could have answers and it'd be different the next day. So just take it one day at a time, basically.
I would say to that point, with everything being so, fluid in terms of everything changing. I know for us, I mean, we'd meet via Zoom once a week, once every 2 weeks. But I remember distinctly meeting on a Thursday evening, and I turned around and we ended up having a follow-up less than 24 hours later. And it was more than anything that for us as a staff, it was, we didn't want our guys to get information outside of us. We wanted to hear it directly from us, whether it was good, bad, or, hey, here's the update and we don't have answers to this, but we have a little bit more clarity to this. It was trying to have a consistent voice where it was coming from, and just trying to reassure them that when we do get information, we're passing it along. I know we did a Zoom with parents as well, just to bring them up to speed as best we could and answer any questions that they may have as well, just so everybody feels involved and feels like they're getting the knowledge that they need.
Yeah, and Dr. Adams, do you have any perspective on how, encountering some of the challenges and the uncertainty, but ways that you can navigate that, especially when it comes to relaying information through multiple channels?
I think it can be so challenging, and there's so many different perspectives of what each athlete might want. And so I think as the coaches are talking about sort of trying to get to know your teammates or your folks on the team and what they need and want. And then really through all of this, I think handling adversity is focusing on what the little pieces are that you do have control over. And so that can look a lot of different ways, but I think that's the biggest way to manage the uncertainty of all this, is to focus in on, recognize that and recognize your emotional experience, and then to focus in on one step at a time.
Great. So far in our conversation, it sounds like that's one big takeaway from both ends, is just kind of focus on that one piece at a time, taking it one day at a time, kind of one obstacle or challenge. And then I hear Coach Huth also saying, like, engage your athletes in that dialogue. Like, what do they need? And have them come up with the list, and have them come up with the options or the themes that they would like. And then Coach Zach saying prompt follow-up. Like, even if it's like, this isn't good news, but I'm going to tell you as soon as I know, has been pretty helpful in developing like consistency. And just as a reminder, we have the chat box open. So if anyone has any questions that they want to send along to the panel, feel free to use the chat box. Okay. And this is kind of going along. So the next question or topic, how do we, coping with, like, being quarantined, and how did you feel as student athletes, like you were the quarantined ones, or, the expectations that are kind of put on all of us, I think from athletic directors down to even us as sports psychologists. When I think about Dr. Teagan, how do we cope with the expectations that we're supposed to be this role model and tough, but also we're going through it too? And anyone can chime in on that question.
I think just knowing that you're not alone, because I know I had to, some of my teammates were quarantining while I was quarantining. So like, just knowing you're not alone in the process. And I mean, it's going to happen sometimes. Like, you can do everything right and still somehow get exposed to it. So
I know one thing for us that's been big through the process, and whether it be the fact that we couldn't be around one another during summer school, and when we've had a couple guys go through it where they've had to have extended quarantine time, is to reassure them we're not behind. We're not falling behind. You take care of your body. You stay on top of your classwork. We will get you back on the court. We will get you back in the weight room. We'll get you back to where you were. You're a highly tuned athlete. A couple weeks is not going to ruin you. In fact, the downtime may in fact help you. But then continuing to have that daily interaction, making sure that they're good, but reassuring them we're not playing games tomorrow. You're going to be all right, and we'll get you back out when we can, when you're healthy.
I think having that coach's trust in like yourself, like, helps so much. Just knowing that you will be fine, and this quarantine is only 2 weeks, and you'll get back to it eventually.
I think it's also an opportunity when our kids have been quarantined or we were apart. I think it's an opportunity to develop other hobbies potentially, whether right now, obviously you're not doing that because you're probably hitting sports now, but in the summertime, it's an opportunity to reach out to mentors, to expand your sort of your network, find somebody that's in your profession that you want to go into, and dialoguing with them, but just kind of expanding your paradigm a bit is really helpful. So I really challenged some of our players in that thought process. And then lastly, whatever you can do to win the day. You know, if winning the day today is, hey, you know, I got a great hit workout in and, you know, I was able to get outside and get some shots up. Like whatever, if you can win the day somehow, some way, find a way to do it.
Oh, I love that. I love that, you know, Shaylin said, you're not alone, right? So the athletes, you're not alone. I'm hearing also just the reassurance, you're not behind. And then also from Coach Jenny of the growth mindset, use as an opportunity. What can you do? What can you focus on growing about yourself, whether it's hobbies or whether it's, you know, kind of winning the day, and what does that mean to you? So celebrating the wins and the victories. It's great.
One of the things we also talk a lot about too, that it's okay to not be okay all the time. I think especially as athletes, because we show up as folks who can handle things and handle adversity and be tough and have it all together, that sometimes it's really hard to ask for help. And I think especially as even sports psychologists, we're supposed to be the ones helping other people. And so I think just creating a little room for, it's okay if you're not okay every day or every moment. And this is a time where there is a huge fluctuation and roller coaster of emotions that's really normal and common. And so allowing yourself some space for that, and then also knowing yourself and when you need to ask for support around that, I think can be really helpful. And that's hard, but finding the key people you trust that you could open up to, I think is really valuable.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. I feel like that was for like the coaches and also the professionals in the room. And maybe giving some insight to student athletes, like, hey, even the coaches, the staff, we're human. Like we're figuring out how to cope with that as well, and to find our people and to find our support and our resources. And I think the word that comes to mind, and I know that we've talked about in pre-sessions, is just giving each other grace. Giving each other that leeway to say, hey, we're going to make mistakes. We're human. You know, we're all human trying to figure this unknown out together. Yeah. And so, and I think about that, one thing that's come up that I've heard is that, like, how to hold, you know, we know we're all stressed and these parameters kind of keep changing, but how do we hold each other accountable? You know, when, you know, again, some of these parameters are changing, but you also know, let's start with like teammates, like when you also know maybe some of your teammates are going to a party, or people aren't wearing, you know, protective gear, or kind of following some of these some rules. So like this culture of accountability, how do we, why is it important, but also how do we create that? What are some elements of that come to mind?
I'd say for us, it's no different than when we as coaches ask our players to be coachable. Our school president, our mayor, our administrators are asking us to, you know, do what we ask of. And so when we're given the guidelines of, hey, you know, when you're working out, whether you're in the, or, you know, whether you're meeting in the office, whether you're at workouts, we want you wearing a mask. We want you to socially distance. We want you, you know, make sure you're doing what's right, what's expected. And that's something that we have continued to relay to our group on a regular basis. And that's, you know, we're doing what's asked of us, to doing it for the better good, and hopes that we get through all of this sooner than later.
A big thing that we talk about is that we want to have a season, so we're willing to do anything we need to in order to have a season. So wearing our masks, socially distancing, like not going to parties, like you said, like we're sacrificing a lot just so we can try to have a season.
I think one of the biggest thing is self-accountability with this, because there's been standards set and expectations that we have. So I think one of the biggest things is like coaches or the athletic trainers aren't always going to be there to babysit or tell you to put a mask on. So I think just self accountability and be willing to do those things on your own is probably one of the biggest things.
I think we've set standards early and then just stuck to them. And obviously we have as athletes, you kind of have your rules of engagement every day anyways. So this is just one more thing. We just got to hold ourselves accountable. Nate, I love what you said. It's like, I love the quote that says, discipline yourself so no one else has to. And that high level of responsibility is kind of an honor, you know, and you take it seriously, obviously. And so I think in the accountability section, I think you're already going to have it. You're used to it. And so this is just that one more thing that we need. And then you got to nip it when you see kids without masks or out social distancing, you know, you got to call it out. And on our team, one of the things we say is go to your teammate first. And if your teammate doesn't respond to you, then come to the coach. And so that you guys can start building that accountability within the team. Because like Shylin said, it's, hey, you know, at the very end of the day, we want a season. And so we all have to come back to that. We want a season, we want to be able to play. And if we're all centered around that, then we're going to probably follow the rules, and the accountability has a better chance of really sticking.
And I would add to find out what piece of it motivates you. So for some people, it might be the season. For some people, it's I don't want to get my grandparents sick, or I don't want to pass it to other people, and figure out what in it drives you to be able to stick to those expectations as well. Because I think we all have different pieces of that we relate to most.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. So, you know, if we're going to ask our players to do something, then we should be doing it ourselves. Find your reason, and kind of like Shylin said, and Dr. Adams said, like, you know, wanting a season is very motivating to do a certain behavior, but also for other athletes, it may be very personal, maybe, you know, not wanting to get their family member sick. So finding your reason to do that, but also, you know, being very clear about how you expect your athletes to handle conflict. And maybe this is a question for Dr. Adams that we can dialogue on. How do you handle conflict? No one likes to, you know, I know a lot of athletes I meet with are very conflict avoidant. Some of us grown-ups are too. So what are some tips on being able to address conflict when, you know, like coach wants me to go to my teammate, because if I go to her, she's going to ask me, did I go to my teammate? And I'm scared of that. So.
I think that's a big, a big question. I mean, I think sometimes things feel scarier and are not actually dangerous. And so the anxiety we feel internally is sort of speaking to us in this old system that's relating to these actual dangers. And so sometimes just checking that piece, that this feels really scary, but it's not dangerous to do this thing. And then I think any hard conversation, it's being kind and compassionate, thinking about the other person's perspective, communicating clearly, finding a time maybe where you could communicate privately, so it's not calling people out, but maybe that's okay in the culture of the team too. So knowing what is appropriate on your team. And then I think often we talk about sharing the experience with the other person. Like, it's hard for me to see you without a mask because I'm wearing a mask. We want to play. How can we get you on board? And trying to call people into that, as opposed to what we often want to do is like, you're not doing this or you're doing this. And that just immediately makes us all react with defensiveness. I think that's just what happens. And so trying to invite people into conversation to get people on board together, as opposed to what often we think about with conflict, which is like this separating thing, which is not the goal here.
So I hear your last point saying conflict could actually bring you together, right? To kind of tussle through the difficulties. But also hear you saying target the behavior, not necessarily the individual. And I hear you when you modeled it using I statements. So when I saw that you weren't wearing your mask, I got concerned. I felt XYZ, so using the I statements, right? And being able to recognize that it's uncomfortable, but the feelings it's not gonna, it's not, you're not in danger or threat, right? Which I feel like with anxiety, it's our body's natural system for safety, right? So if something doesn't quite feel safe, and I think sometimes conflict, not knowing how it's going to impact a relationship, doesn't feel good. Good. Anybody else want to chime in on what could be effective approach for how they like when someone has some conflict or wants to address or hold them accountable? What's important to you? Maybe for this.
To me, it's a little bit different in terms of, our guys are used to, whether it be, for example, in the weight room or on the court, holding one another accountable. And whether it's, hey, we got, you've got that adrenaline in you, you've got that, bravado about you as far, hey, we got to pick it up, we got to do this. Whereas in terms of what we're dealing with now, I think it's having the right tone. It might be as simple as a reminder as, hey, remember, we're supposed to be wearing our masks. We're going into this building. It may be something that's simple to trigger it. And I think that might be the right approach initially. And then, like Jenny said, I mean, then it's, talking to your coach or going to another step. I mean, there's many, many layers to all of this. And, we've talked about it countless times. I mean, for us, we have 15 guys on the team. They come from different families that are across the board, across the country, and may have differing opinions as to how this is all going in terms of how the country is attacking, trying to make, what we're dealing with the virus better. And so you just never know where different kids from their families are coming from. So I think, again, just getting back to that, having that right tone, having that right approach to your teammates is the right way to go, I think.
That's a really important. Go ahead. Go.
I was just going to say that's making me think that it's also okay to maybe have different opinions about it, but that you're choosing to commit to these behaviors that are required and that are a part of the team culture.
Yeah, I think that's the key word, choice, right? If we're choosing to be on the team, choosing to be at your school, the other pieces then become a choice, right? But as Coach Zach was talking, it made me think about just even how, yes, international students, but culture, right? And backgrounds, and really that all plays into communication styles and how coaches respond to authority or different values we bring into the team. What values have you saw that are kind of core to developing this culture of accountability and handling this uncertainty as we keep moving forward?
I know for us, we're very fortunate in terms of the maturity level on our team. I know that's gone a long way in terms of our ability to push forward through the summer and now into the fall. I know that's been a big part of it. And I'm sure the guys would tell you if they heard me say that we as a group have to remain positive and patient one more time. I think I've inundated them with that slogan. So we're continuing to hang in there with all of it for sure.
I think that maybe this is just a little bit of who I am, but looking at an opportunity for growth, we all kind of cycle through these feelings of, oh, are we gonna have a season? Are we not? And then you kind of get to a place where you're like, this stinks. Okay, but what's the good part about it? You're just like in this whole dialogue back and forth with yourself. But the word that I like to bring up with our team is just, hey, we have an opportunity to become really resilient. And this is going to be a muscle for us for the rest of our life.
Dr. Adams, I'm seeing you nod your head. You want to chime in there?
I think that's awesome. I think 100%, right? That using this in terms of the mental opportunity to deal with adversity, to develop flexibility, exactly what she's saying, I think is so helpful. And any of these experiences help challenge us and help us grow that muscle, right?
Which made me think of yeah, some of these were challenged to learn new skills during this time, but it seems like they're emotional, mental, communication skills, right? So you learn skills in gym, basketball, football, right? And it's repetitive and the fine points, but communication and making the emotional and mental muscles are kind of the same thing, right? We're challenged to practice those, and those will inevitably be uncomfortable. Yeah. And I think that's why this conversation was really important to us as we were preparing how we wanted to start off this virtual panel, is to really, one, like validate the experiences that we're all having, and that there's no right or wrong way. I think Dr. Adams said that at the outset, that, you know, whatever you're feeling, it's okay to not be okay. But there's also support and solutions out there that we can offer each other, if we can find it and find a way to reach out and build that system of community. Yeah. And so, you know, when we think about like moving forward and how do we create, you know, moving from this point onward, what would you say are some key things now that schools and student athletes are balancing school, meetings, practice, and then still planning for the spring? What would you say to the athletes out there that are kind of saying, well, I just want to know how to move forward from this point? What could be helpful?
I know from our perspective as coaches, it's stay in the moment. Understand that us as coaches, I mean, I'm not thinking anything about the month of October. I'm worried about today's workout. I'm worried about, you know, what we're going to do in our next meeting. Us as a staff, we're not looking anything past about a week's worth of time, just because, I mean, if we go backwards in time about 7, 8 days ago, we had a plan in place as to what we were going to do over the next few days. And we went from having about half our roster able to meet or work out to we went to 0 in a heartbeat. It just happened. I mean, just a few circumstances that happened and everything was off the table. And it was, you know, get back on and say, hey guys, I'm still smiling. We're good. We're going to be okay. It's just today changed. And the plan we had in place, we're scrapping it. This is what we're going to do tomorrow. This is what we'll plan ahead for next week. So just understand in terms of, you know, the athletes across the board, just understand your coaches are dealing with the same thing. The administrators are dealing with the same thing. And as long as we're continuing to support one another, as long as we can wake up and put a smile on and understand that we're here to help one another, it's going to help us get through everything.
So I hear you having a lot of mental flexibility that you may wake up and get some information that may change how you structured your whole day, and just being flexible and coping with that is important.
It is a must, but that's okay. I mean, it's what we've grown accustomed to. I mean, I talk about our head trainer here, Chris Walsh, has been doing yeoman's work, and the least that I can do in my position is continue to, number one, be supportive of everything that he's doing to help not only our department as a whole, but this campus. But I know how hard he's worked. I know how much time he has invested in keeping all of us as healthy as possible. And so whatever I can do to assist in that regard to our team specifically, but everybody, you know, up and down our hallway here to, you know, all the kids I interact with on a daily basis. So, you know, it's an example like that that makes it easy to try to do your best to help out.
I think the same, very much along the same lines. You know, nobody asked for COVID, and so we've got to do the best we can with it. If you're starting a season in the spring, where we're fortunate right now we're in season, but if you're starting a season in the spring, it's another opportunity. Can you hone a skill set? Can you get stronger? Can you change your diet a little? You know, those types of things. Can you watch more film to prepare you and get you ready for when your time does come? So that's for the spring athletes. And then I think, you know, for us, like he was saying, we have to be super flexible. You know, I remember like 2 weeks ago, I walked in, I had 14 kids on the roster and we were down to 4-person workout. And the 4 that were in there, we made sure they're having fun and they had the opportunity to grow. If you have to take a couple steps back, and we know we all are going to be in that boat, you just have to throw the plans out the window and start again. And I think as leaders, it's our job to lead in that. We can't dwell and we can't sulk. Doesn't mean we're not human. It just means we have an opportunity to lead. And as we lead, we're going to have our own frustrations. And I don't think venting to the team is the right place, but having our community around us to support us is really important, and that we draw into that as well as coaches, that we have people in our network that can support us when we need a pick me up, because we're the pick me up for the athletes.
Yeah, focusing on our own self-care as well. And I like how you said that there's, I guess what I heard was that you have like a boundary, that you don't feel that venting to the team is the most effective way for you as in your team and your culture, to be able to draw that line and say, wait a minute, I need to find my other support so it doesn't impact how I work with my team. Yeah. And from a student athlete perspective, what do you feel like is important to share with your fellow athletes moving forward? Kind of knowing things may change, or like coaches alluded to, like you may be the only one showing up at practice and there's 3 teammates there.
I think a big thing is just trust. I know everyone in our administration and stuff like that is trying their best to make sure that we can play. And so we just need to trust what they're doing and that they know what's best for us. I think that's probably the biggest thing.
I agree with Nate. And another thing that's like been helping me is just realizing that every day you get to go to practice is like an opportunity. You can't take anything for granted anymore. Like we probably used to, like we can't practice every day, probably, stuff like that.
Yes, the power of gratitude, right? Yeah. So we did get a question in, so I'll just share it with the group and whoever wants to chime in. Is it important for me to make my coaches aware of my mental health issues, or should I keep them to myself so they don't think I'm weak? Who wants to
That's
chime in?
that's a great question. And I think that goes back to why I'm on this committee, is that we have to take away the stigma of mental health. It's all around us. You know, you can watch professional athletes really talking about it a little bit more. So hopefully that's helping, but also just as a coach on this call, that if I feel like my athlete is struggling, the first thing I want to do is refer them out if it's something that I feel like it's outside of my wheelhouse. And I think there's a confidentiality factor that coaches don't need to know about. But the end of the day for me is I want my athletes to be whole people and fully engaged. And they're probably on a scholarship or at the school because they're really good at the sport. You know, that's the first point. And so if something's standing in your way to that, and then it's good. Ask for help. And for me, I don't think it's weakness. I actually think it's a sign of strength.
I would agree in terms of please speak up to your coach. I know that it's something that we are constantly talking to our guys about, that if something is going on, and whether it be with school, their family, it doesn't have to have anything to do with basketball, that if something's on your mind, big or small, we want to hear from you. And again, I agree wholeheartedly with Jenny. If it's something that's over my head, I will be the first to say, I don't know, but I will find who is the right person for you to talk to. But at the same time, if there's something, and sometimes it's just being a matter of being a good listener. And I have assured our guys, and I have a great deal of faith in what I've had the ability to do in years past, that I will listen to whatever our guys have to say. And whether that means they're stopping by the house at night because they need something, they want to come through the office, they want to get away from here because it's a private conversation. Your coaches want to hear from you because they want to know what's going on with you, and they want to be able to understand and support you however you need best moving forward.
It sounds like the really effective approach is, yes, you want to hear from them. And if you feel like it's outside of your scope, or you need to get a professional involved, you know directly who to go to engage that support for the athlete. Yeah. And Dr. Teagan, I'm wondering if you can take it a step further and talk about maybe different ways, like if an athlete comes to you and says, hey, my teammate is expressing suicidal thoughts, or I'm scared for their safety. Should I tell coach? Should I tell you? And do we get the athlete? What are some ways that you've worked with that? And I know there's no one straight answer for that. Yeah.
Sure. I also was thinking too, I think both the coaches sound amazing. And I've certainly worked with some athletes where it didn't feel safe maybe to go directly to coach or the head coach maybe, but there's other folks on the coaching staff or athletic trainers, so go to someone, I would say for sure. And then also I like to talk about differentiating like safety and comfort. There's a lot of stuff that feels uncomfortable. And it's okay to go to coach if you feel uncomfortable, and that might be different than if it feels sort of unsafe for some reason. But go to someone, I would say, and try to build that trust and support. Yeah, I think if a friend or someone on the team came to me and asked about somebody else, I think that can be tricky. Obviously, we talk about immediate danger, and we always recommend if you're concerned about a player, a teammate, ask directly about thoughts of suicide. There's a huge myth that asking about that is going to give someone the idea of that. That's not true. And it can be a uncomfortable and scary thing to talk about. We also want to know how quickly we would need to act or intervene if there was thoughts of suicide, right? So I think there's not a right way. We have a crisis line at our school. I imagine most universities do. There's also crisis lines nationally. So that could be a way too, if you didn't know the counseling center on your school, but to reach out and consult. You can consult on those calls, say like, this is what's happening, or I'm with my friend, or I'm not sure what to do. It's okay to not know, I guess I'd say is the first thing, and just ask. Find someone who could get you to somewhere else. And if it's your coach, maybe they can get you to the counseling center or the crisis shift, or we work really close with our athletic trainers at my university. And so they often have really close relationships with the athletes that they're able to refer folks. So it doesn't have to go through a coach. A coach doesn't have to know, though we always talk about the benefits and how to increase communication and collaboration with people that can be on your support team. I'm not sure if I answered the question directly, but I would say don't keep it to yourself. Say something, ask for help. And it's also okay. People have come in and said, hey, my friend said this, and maybe it's about them. And that's the first way they can get in the door and see if they can trust you. And so finding someone you think you can trust is really important.
And I also hear you saying, if you don't know, there's so many resources out there that could guide you to the correct resource. Because ultimately, if something does happen, coach is going to find out anyways, right? So being able to do that quickly, like you said, being able to reach out. And I think it's important to talk about in this context, because uncertainty and isolation can really impact the other people. Anxiety is in the description and the title of this talk, but it could be any other, depression, all kinds of things, other mental health concerns that can impact us during this time. And certainly, a point that came in through the Zoom question is the impacts that you've witnessed or experienced from teammates who make comments maybe about the social injustice or the anti-racism. A lot of campuses are rolling that out, and how that's impacting teams, or how you saw it play it on your team, or just points that you want to make in regards to Black Lives Matter and possibly being in cities where there has been protests.
I know for us, it was challenging, and for us not to be together in terms of physical proximity, to go through what has transpired over the course of the summer specifically, and even more directly to when the murder of George Floyd this summer. And I know for us, shortly thereafter, we had a team Zoom call, and I go back to, we recruited guys that they haven't met one another yet. And we discussed it a little bit. And then but I also wanted our guys to feel like if they wanted to, that they had a voice, that they could speak up. And I'm still to this day amazed at one of our young men that he didn't know anybody, from an extended amount of time other than just seeing them on a computer screen. And he was able to share a personal story, and the depth that he went into, the struggle that he went through, for him to feel that open and share it, I thought was astounding. I mean, it was just amazing, his ability to share it. And it was eye-opening, not only for myself, but for everybody else on our call, what he had gone through. Because for so many of us, you don't give it a second thought. It's just not what you've grown up with. I know, as I've discussed this with our staff and a few others I've shared the story with, one of my daughters that's about the same age as our player that happened to, speaking up on the call, they're about the same age. And I looked over as he was finishing telling his story, she was in tears. And so it's just amazing what has transpired over these months. And again, I get back to, thank goodness we're all together, and, just to be able to have that dialogue in person, to do it where I can see you, see your body language a little bit, read off of you a little bit. But again, the opportunity to listen and have everybody share their background, where they've come from, what they've experienced, I think is a huge eye opener for so many people, including myself.
And I don't know if others want to chime in here, but personally speaking, I think it's powerful when a head coach creates that space for their athletes to share their voice. Because I really do believe attitude is a reflection of leadership. And sometimes it's harder for teammates to, we talked about, address the conflict if they're having different experiences. But to see that modeled and to see the space created, I think can be very powerful, and it might make it more likely for teammates to ask further, right? Because it sounds like when it comes to issues of racial injustice, we may not have the direct experience with it, right? It's like, I don't know what hallucinations feel like in order to have empathy for someone that has hallucinations, right? Or psychosis. So we don't have to directly relate to it in order to be supportive and to listen and to understand. Because there was a question that came through. So thank you for sharing your experience. Anyone else want to share?
For us, Coach Petrino, he had when everything was happening, he had everyone in a Zoom call, and we had probably an hour and a half just open dialogue. Anyone who felt like they had something to say or needed to say was able to talk during that time. And then probably about 2 weeks ago, before practice, a couple people from the Moscow Police Department came to our practice, and we just had an open dialogue with them and talked about how we should interact if anything was to happen. And so that was really beneficial to us, I think.
I think we've had a lot of different conversations throughout the summer, and they've gone a couple different ways. Some of our players just want to make a change. They want society to change, and so they want to take action. They're tired of what's going on. As a community here at UNC, we watched the movie 13th, and then so there's a lot of follow-up dialogue after that, just to put us all in position to have conversations, whether it's directly from the George Floyd or just this ongoing conversation, keeping it at the forefront. Because I know we can all say a statement and make a statement, but it's the ongoing dialogue that we feel is important for our team. Again, we brought in a police officer and just dialoguing, what does that look like? And so everything on TV isn't the only thing they see. There's more to every story. There are many layers in what's going on in this unrest right now. So I think just keeping the open dialogue and finding ways to hear each other's stories, because you can't refute someone's story. It's theirs, and you learn a lot in the stories, but having the safe space to share it is really important.
Thank you for that. The question that came through was how to address teammates or others who make comments or downplay the impact of racial injustice on people of color and the Black Lives Matter movement. And, I didn't frame the question directly like that, but I feel like you spoke to creating those spaces for athletes to be able to address those and to make it safe. And so I think that's, for those that are listening, a really valuable point to just even acknowledge that it's happening and that it's impacting the lives of your student athletes can be a powerful message. And Dr. Teagan, if we want to wrap up with you, maybe do you have any thoughts about how an athlete can go about developing how to again communicate with a teammate that they feel hurt or they feel like another person's behavior is not honoring their experience?
I'm sort of sitting with that. I think it feels tough to speak about how to do that effectively, because I think we all have our own ongoing work to be doing, and so just recognizing my position, my perspective as well as a white woman, and how that is seen. I think there's some common strategies, I guess, for handling a lot of difficult conversations. And I think it also, there can be a parallel with, like, this is a business and a job. And there's ways that even if we're not best friends or don't agree on everything, like Zach was saying with COVID, even, that there's a way we can still have a community and have similar goals and work together. And so I think finding ways, again, to sort of call in and be real with one another. I think that looks different on every team, especially with size and coach interest too. But I think it's important that we're all modeling and not just talking about it, but also doing the work and recognizing it's impacting our staff as well, and not just the student athletes, but that we all need to be taking action and modeling that way as well.
Thank you for that. And thank you for your honesty and the complexity of being able to balance those conversations. And I think that's what our subcommittee really understood when we started with this panel series, that it's not going to be a series that everything's going to be wrapped up and here's what you do, because everything's still changing as we go through it. And this was more about just creating a space where we could offer some of these experiences and dialogues. So I appreciate what you all have to say today. And we're wrapping up for today. I really appreciate all the conversation and the questions that came through. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our first virtual mental health panel. A special shout out to Denise Thompson for managing our technology and making today seamless. For more resources and recording of today's discussion, please visit the Big Sky Mental Health resource page. Additionally, we have created a document for follow-up discussion questions for you to continue this conversation with your team. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next virtual panel in October. Have a good day.